Have you ever found yourself on the very edge of a breakthrough, standing at the doorway of something that could change everything, only to turn around and walk away? Maybe you didn't even realize it in the moment. Maybe it looked like harmless procrastination, a skipped workout, an impulsive argument, or a night of comfort food after weeks of clean eating. You tell yourself, it's fine, I'll get back on track tomorrow. But tomorrow turns into next week, and before long, you're right back where you started, if not further behind. And the most frustrating part? You knew better. You felt better. You were doing better. So why did you throw it all away? I've been there too. A few years ago, after a troubling doctor's visit, I made a decision to take my health seriously. I was done with the excuses. I changed my diet, started working out regularly, slept better, and even meditated for the first time in my life. Within 3 months, the results were undeniable. I had more energy, my mood was lifted, and the numbers on my lab report started to tell a new story, one of healing. Friends noticed. I noticed. Everything was aligning. And then, almost imperceptibly at first, things began to slip. Just one skipped workout, one late night snack, one day without stretching that turned into a week. And slowly, I unraveled it all. What had been a promising new chapter dissolved into the same old story. I was right back to the habits that got me that doctor's warning in the first place. And the part that haunted me wasn't the physical decline. It was the emotional weight of knowing that I had done this to myself. Again, that's when I started asking the question that many of us eventually confront. Why do I keep getting in my own way? Why do we sabotage the very things we say we want most? Health, love, success, peace. Why does the moment we start seeing progress feel like the moment something inside us slams on the brakes? It's a question that took me deeper than I expected. Not into motivational quotes or productivity hacks, but into the hidden architecture of the human psyche, into the work of Carl Jung. Now, if you've ever felt like you're fighting against yourself, like there's a tug of war between what you want and what you do, Jung's work might just feel like someone reading your diary. Unlike traditional psychology, which often focuses on behavior modification, Jung dug beneath the surface. He believed that self-sabotage isn't simply a result of weak willpower or laziness. It's the expression of unconscious forces operating behind the curtain of awareness. Forces that, in their own paradoxical way, believe they're protecting us. One of Jung's most powerful contributions to psychology is the concept of the shadow. It's the name he gave to the parts of ourselves we repress, disown, or never develop because we've been taught by parents, culture, religion, or experience that they're unacceptable. Anger, sexuality, pride, vulnerability, ambition, even joy. When we're young, we learn very quickly which parts of us get love and which parts bring rejection. So we adapt. We create a socially acceptable version of ourselves, a persona, and bury the rest. But what we bury doesn't disappear. It lives on in the unconscious. And if we don't acknowledge it, it comes back with a vengeance, usually as self-sabotage. Think about it. Have you ever noticed that you start to feel physically unwell when you're about to take a big step forward? Or that you suddenly pick a fight with someone right when things are finally going well? Or that you procrastinate so long on a passion project that it dies before it's born? That's the shadow at work. Not because it wants to destroy you, but because it wants to be heard. It's saying, "You've forgotten me. You've left out important pieces of who you are." Jung warned us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And that's exactly what most of us do. We tell ourselves that it just wasn't meant to be, that we weren't disciplined enough, or lucky enough, or strong enough. But the truth is often this: some part of us, very deep, believed that change was too dangerous, that success meant risk, that intimacy meant vulnerability, that health meant giving up something comforting. And so, the emergency brake is pulled. Quietly, efficiently, and just like that, we're back where it's safe. But here's where Jung's perspective gets even more profound. The shadow isn't just a container for your bad traits. It also holds your most vibrant, creative, and essential energies, parts of you that were simply never given space to thrive. Maybe as a child you learned that being assertive meant being difficult, so you silenced your voice. Or maybe your sensitivity was dismissed as weakness, so you armored yourself with sarcasm. Whatever the specifics, the shadow contains not just what you fear, but what you need to become whole. And this is where self-sabotage becomes more than a frustration, it becomes a message. It's your unconscious mind waving a flag saying, there's more to you than this mask you're wearing. Every time you derail your progress, your psyche may be trying to protect a part of you that was never allowed to speak. Every time you implode just before a breakthrough, it might be your inner child, still terrified of being abandoned, mocked, or hurt again. Jung also introduced the idea of complexes, clusters of emotionally charged thoughts, memories, and behaviors that form around unhealed wounds, particularly from childhood. These complexes don't sit quietly in your memory bank. They shape how you see the world, how you respond to stress, and how you treat yourself. If you grew up being told you had to earn love through achievement, you might sabotage rest because rest feels like failure. If you experienced emotional abandonment, you might end relationships preemptively just to avoid being left again. What's fascinating and a little terrifying is how these complexes get triggered by present-day situations that resemble the past. It's like your nervous system says, we've been here before. We know how this ends. And so, without realizing it, you repeat the same story in a desperate attempt to rewrite the ending. Jung called this the repetition compulsion, our unconscious drive to revisit the scene of the crime, hoping this time we'll gain control. But unless we bring these wounds into conscious awareness, we just keep circling the same pain. And yet, Jung wasn't pessimistic about this. He believed that the psyche is not chaotic, it's intelligent. It's always working toward integration, toward balance, toward what he called individuation, the process of becoming your full, authentic self. From that view, self-sabotage isn't just a malfunction. It's a signal, a clue, an invitation to turn inward and ask, what part of me is trying to speak through this chaos? What have I rejected in myself that now demands attention? Even the most seemingly irrational acts, quitting a job you loved, ghosting someone you care about, binge eating after weeks of progress, may be a twisted kind of wisdom. Maybe your unconscious mind sensed a threat to your sense of identity. Maybe your success was outpacing your self-worth. Maybe your inner child was screaming, "This feels like danger," and you didn't even hear it until it was too late. So, what do? We start by turning toward the shadow, not away from it. That means getting curious about your triggers instead of shaming them. It means noticing when sabotage shows up and asking, what am I really afraid of here? It means acknowledging the parts of yourself you've been taught to hide and welcoming them home. This work isn't about fixing yourself. It's about reclaiming yourself. The goal isn't perfection. It's wholeness. And as Jung understood, wholeness requires light and shadow, conscious and unconscious, strength and softness, the healed and the healing. The journey is not easy. You will have to look at things you've avoided for years. You will have to feel emotions that make your skin crawl. You will have to question who you think you are. But on the other side is freedom, the kind that doesn't come from avoiding failure, but from no longer being ruled by fear. So if you found yourself sabotaging your own growth, don't rush to judge yourself. That resistance you feel, it might be the beginning of your awakening. And the unraveling, it might just be the first step in becoming whole. Because maybe, just maybe, self-sabotage isn't the enemy. Maybe it's the invitation. There's a strange kind of heartbreak that comes from getting everything you thought you wanted, only to feel yourself quietly unraveling. Maybe you felt it, that inexplicable pull towards self-destruction just as you're stepping into success, love, stability. You procrastinate. You start fights. You sabotage opportunities. From the outside, it makes no sense. But somewhere deep inside, it's like a part of you is resisting, not against failure, but against transformation. This isn't about weakness or lack of discipline. It's something far more human. Something Jung understood deeply. Imagine a person who's spent their whole life being needed. They've built their identity around caretaking, around being the reliable one, the emotional anchor. Their value, at least in their own eyes, depends on how much they can do for others. But after years, that role becomes suffocating. It begins to feel like a mask they can't take off. And then, slowly, often unconsciously, they start to sabotage the very relationships and roles that once gave their life meaning. Not because they don't care anymore, but because something inside them is trying to make space to ask, who am I when I'm not needed? Jung called this phenomenon enantiodromia, the tendency of things to turn into their opposite, especially when one extreme has been pushed too far. It's the psyche's natural response to imbalance. When we deny or suppress certain truths for too long, they don't disappear. They grow stronger in the dark, and eventually they push back. The harder you repress something essential, the more violently it will demand your attention. That's why self-sabotage, for all its chaos, can sometimes be the first sign of deeper integration trying to happen. It isn't always a sign of regression. It can be the beginning of growth. Jung didn't see these moments as breakdowns, but as breakthroughs if we're willing to listen. He believed that the psyche is always striving toward individuation, a lifelong journey of becoming whole. Not perfect, not polished, but whole. That includes the parts of us we've tried to forget, deny, or run from. Self-sabotage in this life isn't just a problem to eliminate, it's a message. A kind of symbolic protest from within. At the surface, we might be striving for growth, wanting to change our lives, our habits, our relationships. But beneath the surface, there can be a quieter voice, a part of us terrified of what that change might mean. Growth often demands that we let go of what feels safe. Identities, roles, even emotional armor that has kept us protected. That fear is real. It's not irrational. It's survival-based. The ego, our conscious sense of self, clings to the known, even if the known is painful, because the unknown feels like death. And in a way, it is a kind of death. The death of who we used to be. The death of an identity we outgrew. As Jung wrote, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. To become who we truly are, we often have to shed layers we once believed were essential to our survival. The more radical the transformation, the more fierce the resistance. Here's the paradox. We fear failure, yes, but sometimes we fear our own potential even more. We fear the responsibility that comes with stepping into our full power. The pressure of living authentically. The possibility of being seen entirely. Jung famously said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And maybe that's what we're truly afraid of, not failure, but the raw truth of our own greatness, with all its consequences. Self-sabotage often reflects this terror. It's not laziness. It's not weakness. It's a coping mechanism developed over years, designed to protect us from overwhelming change. People will do anything, Jung said, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. We sabotage not because we're broken, but because some part of us is begging to be heard. But the beautiful thing about the shadow is this: it doesn't want to ruin your life. It just wants to be acknowledged, integrated, seen. To begin this work, we have to first become honest with ourselves. What patterns have shown up again and again? When do things tend to fall apart? What happens just before we start to sabotage? What do we consistently avoid, even when we know it's good for us? These questions aren't meant to shame us. They're meant to shine a light on the inner dynamics we've kept hidden. Jung believed dreams were a powerful tool in uncovering these unconscious dynamics. Recurring dreams, like being chased, forgetting something important, or being late, can be rich with symbolism. They often reflect our inner fears around inadequacy, exposure, or the pressure to perform. These are clues, signals from the unconscious asking to be explored. Another of Jung's techniques was active imagination, a practice where we engage directly with the unconscious through writing, drawing, or meditation. Instead of ignoring our self-sabotage, we give it form and voice. We ask it questions. We listen to its perspective. What is this behavior trying to protect me from? What would happen if I didn't engage in it? What does it need in order to let go? When we see self-sabotage not as an enemy, but as a protector, albeit one stuck in outdated strategies, our relationship to it begins to shift. We can begin to engage with these patterns compassionately, not judgmentally. There are other signs that shadow content is trying to emerge. Disproportionately strong emotional reactions, recurring conflicts with the same types of people, or judgmental thoughts about others that, upon reflection, mirror something we're denying in ourselves. Jung noted that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. That's not just a quote, it's a mirror. Shadow work asks us to stop running from discomfort and turn toward it with curiosity. Through journaling, creative expression, or therapy, we can explore the traits we've been told work too much, not enough, or inappropriate. These traits, once disowned, often show up in our self-sabotaging behavior, trying desperately to get our attention. By reintegrating them, we reclaim lost pieces of ourselves. This is the essence of Jung's approach, not to eliminate the shadow, but to form a relationship with it, to understand its purpose, to offer it a new role in our lives. Repression only drives these parts deeper underground, where they fester and emerge in distorted forms. But when we acknowledge them, give them space, they lose their power to control us from the shadows. This doesn't mean letting every impulse run wild. Jung spoke of conscious containment, the practice of holding space for our emotions and instincts without being overwhelmed by them. It's a balance, respecting our inner life while choosing how to express it with intention. Integration doesn't mean indulging every urge. It means understanding where those urges come from and channeling their energy in healthier ways. Your anger might become boundary setting. Your chaos might become creativity. Your sensitivity might become empathy. When we meet these parts of ourselves with compassion, they soften. They reveal their gifts. Jung's influence can be seen in many modern therapeutic approaches, like internal family systems, IFS, which views the psyche as made up of different parts, some protectors, some wounded exiles, and all in need of integration. Rather than fixing ourselves, these approaches invite us into relationship with ourselves, allowing healing to happen through connection, not control. Shadow work doesn't end. It's not a one-time fix. It's an ongoing conversation between the conscious and unconscious mind, a dance between who we've been, who we are, and who we're becoming. Jung called this the transcendent function, the capacity to hold opposites until a new perspective emerges. This isn't compromise. It's transformation. That's why simple behavior change strategies so often fail. If we don't understand the deeper purpose behind our self-sabotage, it simply resurfaces in new forms. The resistance is wise. It's trying to protect something it believes is sacred. The goal isn't to crush the resistance, but to understand its language. Your struggles, the ones that keep circling back, are not meaningless. They are invitations, wounds that point to where wholeness is needed. In Jung's words, the attainment of wholeness requires one to stake one's whole being. Nothing less will do. This is the hero's journey, not to defeat the shadow, but to integrate it. To walk into the forest you've avoided, to face what you've buried, and to emerge, not flawless, but fully alive. Psychological maturity, in Jung's vision, isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming honest. It's about holding your contradictions with grace. It's about living from a place where you're no longer at war with yourself. So the next time you catch yourself sabotaging something good, pause. Don't shame yourself. Ask, what am I really afraid of? What part of me is trying to be heard? What would it mean to no longer need this behavior to feel safe? You are not weak for struggling. You are being asked to grow. And growth isn't always comfortable, but it is deeply worth it. As Jung said, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awaits.